The skyline of New York City was a tapestry of indifferent lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vance Tower. Inside, Leo Carter stared into the abyss from the rooftop terrace, the wind whipping at his suit. He had been hiding for exactly 3 minutes and 52 seconds. A new record. Below, the city was a distant, chaotic hum. His phone buzzed relentlessly in his pocket. It was Julian Vance, a man whose voice had become the soundtrack to Leo's personal hell. He considered the 18-story drop, weighing the odds of returning to his own world against the certainty of returning to Julian's oppressive orbit. Deciding on a more proactive form of suicide, he pulled out his phone. He bypassed Julian's calls and opened an encrypted messaging app, creating a new group. Manhattan's most eligible, he typed, before adding a dozen of the city's most prominent socialites. He then dropped a single message into the chat. Julian Vance would be at the Gilded Lily for a business lunch tomorrow. Private inquiries for the exact time and table number were now open for bidding. His phone immediately lit up with notifications. A grim smile touched Leo's lips. For $5 million, he would gladly play matchmaker to the devil himself. He pocketed the phone and straightened his tie, his expression shifting back to one of impeccable professionalism as he walked back toward the executive suite. Julian was waiting, seated in a monolithic leather chair that seemed more like a throne. His long fingers adjusted the gold-rimmed glasses on his nose, and his dark eyes, magnified slightly by the lenses, pinned Leo in place. Julian gestured toward the sofa opposite his desk without a word, a silent command for Leo to sit and wait until needed. It was an infuriatingly childish habit. Leo gave a respectful nod while internally screaming. He picked up a financial report from the coffee table, pretending to be absorbed in its contents. Under the cover of the document, he checked his phone. The group chat had exploded to 50 members. The bids for Julian's lunch details were already climbing past $20,000. A laugh escaped him before he could stifle it. Julian was suddenly standing over him, his tall frame casting a long, intimidating shadow. The air grew thick with the scent of his expensive cologne. Leo quickly hid the phone, his face breaking into a nervous grin. He explained that he had just read a funny meme, commenting on his own low bar for humor. Julian didn't look convinced. He sank onto the sofa next to Leo, the cushion dipping under his weight. His arms stretched along the back of the sofa, casually trapping Leo in the space. An idea sparked in Leo's mind, fueled by the staggering numbers on his phone screen. He shifted closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. He told Julian that, as his assistant, he was concerned. All this work, the long hours, it wasn't healthy. He suggested that perhaps it was time for Julian to find a partner, a proper CEO's wife to take care of him. Julian's eyes, which had been closed, snapped open. He turned, his gaze sharp and analytical. He asked Leo if he had some thoughts on the matter. Leo eagerly affirmed, launching into a sycophantic speech about Julian's many virtues. His looks, his wealth, his status as one of the city's most formidable entrepreneurs. He even confessed that if he weren't a man, he too would be captivated. A faint smirk played on Julian's lips. He seemed pleased by the flattery, murmuring that the idea wasn't entirely without merit. Encouraged, Leo offered to manage the entire process, promising to arrange everything. Julian's expression hardened slightly. He reminded Leo of their professional relationship, telling him to be more discreet. Yet, the tips of his ears had turned a faint pink, a subtle tell that betrayed his curiosity. Leo promised it wouldn't interfere with work. He proposed a schedule, 2 dates a week, with every detail curated by him for maximum romance. All Julian had to do was tell him what kind of woman he liked. As Leo pulled out his phone, ready to take notes, his mind raced with visions of a swift mission completion. He imagined orchestrating a whirlwind romance, a wedding, and then vanishing with his $5 million, leaving Julian to a life of domestic bliss. He was so lost in his fantasy that he missed the storm gathering in Julian's eyes. Julian's voice was dangerously low when he spoke, clarifying if Leo's grand plan was simply to parade a line of women in front of him. His tone was glacial. He rarely used Leo's full name at work, and the sound of it now sent a shiver down Leo's spine. Leo, still oblivious, confirmed that was the plan, promising satisfaction. Julian's response was swift and brutal. He told him to abandon the idea. He didn't need a woman. He rose and walked back to his desk, his posture radiating displeasure. Leo scrambled after him, attempting to negotiate down to 1 date a week. Julian shot back a question about whether Leo had too much free time, threatening to reassign him to the company's logistics hub in Omaha. The look in his eyes was sharp enough to cut glass. Leo immediately fell silent, miming zipping his lips. He retreated to the sofa, concluding that Julian was just a classic, emotionally constipated protagonist. He was sure Julian secretly wanted this. His pride just wouldn't let him admit it. Leo resolved to press on undeterred. For the next month, the group chat became his primary tool. He orchestrated a series of chance encounters for Julian, funded by the eager socialites. There was the heiress whose vintage sports car conveniently broke down outside Vance Tower, the damsel in distress at a charity auction who needed rescuing, and the innocent college student who mistakenly entered his private dining room. Each meticulously planned scene was met with Julian's icy indifference, but Leo's resolve only hardened with each failure. He sat across from Isabella Sterling in a chic Soho cafe. The young woman, heiress to a vast hotel empire, sighed dramatically as she checked her reflection in a compact mirror. She lamented how a man like Julian could be so immune to her charms. Leo sipped his latte, offering practiced words of encouragement. He pointed out that after only 3 encounters, Julian at least knew her name, framing it as a major victory. He was laying the groundwork for his next pitch. Isabella was beautiful, well-connected, and an only child. She was the perfect candidate. Marrying her would be a strategic and aesthetic triumph for any man. He decided to focus all his efforts on her. Isabella, mollified, sent a discreet wire transfer to Leo's account, asking him to keep a close watch on Julian for her. The string of zeros in the confirmation message made it difficult for Leo to maintain a straight face. He promised her she was in good hands. Back in the office, he perused Julian's schedule and noted a formal dinner that evening. It was the perfect opportunity. He strolled into Julian's office, casually inquiring if he had selected a companion for the event. Julian stopped typing and looked up, his brow arched in a silent, questioning gaze. The intensity of his stare was unnerving. Julian always attended these functions alone, a fact well known in their social circles. Leo knew his question was suspicious. He quickly fabricated a reason, babbling about how a consistent partner might deter the recent influx of single women who kept approaching Julian. The excuse felt flimsy even to his own ears. Julian listened without expression, his eyes boring into Leo as if trying to read his soul. A cold smile finally touched Julian's lips. He remarked on how observant Leo was, noticing the sudden surge of female attention around him in the past month. He wondered aloud, his voice laced with sarcasm, how he should properly reward such a dedicated assistant. The veiled threat was unmistakable. Leo felt a prickle of fear. He decided a strategic retreat was in order. He laughed nervously, dismissing his suggestion as a random thought, and turned to leave. Julian's voice stopped him. He said that Leo's proposal had merit. A stable partner could indeed reduce unnecessary complications. And a male partner, he added thoughtfully, would be the most efficient solution of all. He ordered Leo to stay and call his personal stylist. The meaning behind his words sent Leo's mind into a tailspin. The stylist, a flamboyant man named Joey, arrived shortly after. Julian pointed to a sleek, modern tuxedo for himself. Then his gaze shifted to Leo, who was still trying to process the conversation. He instructed Joey to style Leo as well, requesting something different from his usual conservative attire. He wanted Leo to look, in his words, sensual and bold, fitting for a man's first public male companion. Leo was speechless. He tried to protest, reminding Julian that he was an assistant, not a date. Julian calmly stated that accompanying one's boss to an event was part of the job description. He ignored Leo's sputtering and gave Joey a 30-minute deadline. Half an hour later, Leo emerged from the private dressing room a different person. He wore a custom-tailored suit of white satin that clung to his frame. The deep V-neck line hinted at the smooth skin of his chest, and the fabric accentuated the lean lines of his legs and the curve of his hips. The true marvel of the suit was its back, which was open from his shoulder blades down to his waist in an inverted triangle, the gap laced together with strings of lustrous white pearls. The effect was startling, a blend of severe elegance and subtle provocation. Julian, who had been scrolling through his phone, looked up. He went still, his eyes tracing every line of Leo's transformed appearance. He rose and walked toward him, his gaze hot and appreciative. He circled Leo slowly, making him flush with self-consciousness. Leo instinctively tried to cover his exposed chest. Julian stopped in front of him and reached out, his hand gently ruffling Leo's newly styled hair. The heat from Julian's body was overwhelming. Leo took a step back, asking what he was doing. Julian didn't answer. He dismissed Joey and his team with a wave of his hand, leaving the two of them alone in the vast, silent office. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. He commented that, with a little effort, Leo looked quite the part of a kept man. The insult stung, and Leo bristled with indignation. Julian continued, his voice softer now. He explained that he approved of Leo's suggestion about a fixed partner. This was the easiest way to put an end to the unnecessary trouble Leo himself had created. He moved closer, backing Leo up against the sofa until he lost his balance and fell back against the cushions. Julian leaned over him, one hand on the armrest, the other on the back, trapping him completely. He lowered his head, his lips close to Leo's ear. He whispered that he knew exactly where all those women had been coming from. A cold dread washed over Leo. He was caught. Julian straightened up and walked to the door, telling him not to dawdle. The driver was waiting. The ballroom was a sea of glittering chandeliers and hushed conversations. Julian's hand was a hot, firm presence on the small of Leo's back, guiding him through the crowd. The pressure was possessive, making Leo want to squirm away. Suddenly, Julian tightened his grip, pulling Leo flush against his chest. The impact sent a jolt of pain through Leo's nose. He looked up, tears welling in his eyes, ready to protest, but Julian's hand cupped his jaw. Then, his lips were on his, a soft, warm pressure that stole the air from Leo's lungs. Leo's mind went blank, then exploded into a million panicked thoughts. He shoved against Julian's chest, trying to free himself. He was not gay. This was not part of any job description he had ever read. Julian pulled back slightly, his lips brushing against Leo's cheek as he prepared to kiss him again. Leo flinched away. Julian's voice was a low murmur against his ear. calling him by a shortened version of his name that no one else used. He told him it was just an act for the onlookers. Leo risked a glance around the room and saw that he was right. Several pairs of eyes were fixed on them with open curiosity. Julian warned him to play along, or the next kiss would be in front of everyone. Leo froze, a hostage to the charade. For the rest of the evening, he was a perfect prop, smiling until his face ached while Julian paraded him around the room. Their bodies close, a picture of intimacy. The moment they were in the back of the town car, Leo collapsed against the leather seat, exhausted. He rubbed his sore cheeks and stated firmly that this was a one-time event. He did not consent to workplace harassment. Julian, who had already reverted to his cold CEO persona, ignored him and instructed the driver to head to the airport. Leo was confused. Julian explained that an urgent project required their presence in Chicago. The rest of the team was already there. He then immersed himself in a tablet, leaving no room for argument. Leo began to protest about his need for sleep, for a life, but Julian cut him off with a simple offer of triple pay for the duration of the trip. Leo's objections died in his throat. He straightened up and replied that he was honored to be of service. The Chicago project went smoothly, and 3 days later, they were at a celebratory dinner with their new partners. The head of the partner company, a boisterous man from the Midwest, insisted on round after round of celebratory drinks with Julian. By the end of the night, both men were thoroughly intoxicated. As the dutiful assistant, Leo arranged for everyone to get back to their hotels before turning his attention to Julian, who was slumped in a corner, staring blankly into space. Getting Julian out of the restaurant and back to their hotel was a monumental struggle. The man was dead weight, a pliant but heavy presence leaning against him. By the time they reached Julian's hotel room door, Leo was panting with exertion. Julian, instead of helping, simply rested his head in the crook of Leo's neck, nuzzling against him like a giant cat. Leo had to awkwardly fish for the keycard in Julian's suit pants. As his hand slid along the man's muscular thigh, he felt Julian's breathing quicken. He finally found the card, his knuckles brushing against something hot and hard in the process. He pulled his hand back as if shocked, his ears burning. A low groan rumbled in Julian's chest. Leo fumbled with the lock, finally getting the door open and half throwing, half guiding Julian onto the bed. He sank onto the edge of the mattress, trying to catch his breath. A moment later, strong arms wrapped around his waist from behind. Julian was awake, his breath a hot mix of expensive liquor and mint against Leo's skin. He pleaded with Leo not to leave, to stay with him. He said he was afraid of the dark. Then he commanded Leo to stop calling him Mr. Vance and to use his name. Leo tried to reason with him, but Julian pulled him down onto the vast, soft bed. He pinned Leo beneath him, his hands braced on either side of his head. His eyes were dark and intense. He asked Leo why he was so dense. He questioned what more he had to do to make his feelings clear. He spoke in a rush, a torrent of confession. He said no other assistant had the freedom Leo did, that no other boss would tolerate his employee setting him up on dates. He admitted that he kept Leo by his side simply because he wanted to see him all the time. He had been so obvious, he lamented, and all he wanted was for Leo to take the hint and confess first so he could just say yes. The words struck Leo like lightning. This wasn't right. Julian was supposed to like women. His entire $5 million plan hinged on it. Had he been reading the situation wrong from the very beginning? His mission, his escape, it was all crumbling around him. The morning after was a haze of confusion. Leo had fled the hotel room at dawn, leaving Julian asleep in the rumpled sheets. Back in New York, He hid in his apartment for 3 days, replaying the events in his mind. The way Julian had held him, the desperate words whispered in the dark. It felt too real to be a drunken mistake. He was terrified to face him, to confront the reality that his novel was not a romance, but a gay romance, and that he, Leo, was the intended target. He called out for System 725, the silent, unhelpful entity that had thrown him into this mess. But there was only silence. Finally resigning himself to his fate, he decided he would have to quit, to disappear and forfeit the mission. He switched on his work phone, preparing to type his resignation. It was flooded with messages and missed calls, but one from a junior colleague caught his eye. It was a frantic text. Julian Vance had been in a car accident. He was in the hospital and his condition was critical. All thoughts of awkwardness and confusion evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure panic. He didn't think, he just ran. He found the hospital, the room number from the text. His hand trembled as he pushed the door open. The moment he stepped inside, he was pulled into a familiar, strong embrace. Julian held him from behind, his arms wrapped tightly around him. He was not in a hospital bed. He was not injured at all. His voice was thick with emotion as he apologized. He confessed he had lied, that he knew Leo was angry, but begged him to listen. He admitted it was his first time falling for someone, and the fact that it was a man didn't matter, it was just him, Leo. He apologized for the night in Chicago, for being impulsive and scaring him away. When he'd woken up to find Leo gone, he had panicked. Seeing no other way to get Leo to see him, he had resorted to another deception. Leo stood frozen in his arms, listening to the rambling, heartfelt confession. And in that moment, he understood his own heart. The mission, the money, none of it mattered anymore. All he wanted was to be here with this man. He felt a dampness on his neck and realized Julian was crying. A small, exasperated sound escaped Leo's lips. He told Julian he was going to suffocate him. Then, with a strength he didn't know he possessed, he spun around, breaking the hold. He backed Julian against the wall, stood on his toes, and crushed his mouth against his. The kiss was hungry and desperate, a conversation without words. When they finally broke apart for air, Leo's hand was pressed against Julian's chest. He looked him dead in the eye and demanded $5 million in damages. He told him he had no idea what he'd given up for him. Julian's answering smile was brilliant. He promised Leo anything. His company, his fortune, himself. Everything was his. Life settled into a new, wonderful rhythm. Leo had accepted he would stay in this world forever, content to be by Julian's side. Then, one ordinary afternoon, System 725 reappeared. A large, holographic screen materialized in the middle of the living room, and a synthesized voice echoed in his head. It congratulated him on completing the mission. The $5 million reward had been deposited into his spatial account. The system chattered excitedly, praising its own excellent judgment in picking a host who could complete the mission without any guidance. Leo, utterly bewildered, demanded an explanation. The system finally revealed the truth. He had been transmigrated into a BL novel. Julian Vance was the main love interest, the top, and he, Leo Carter, was the other lead, the bottom. The mission to help Julian find his true love had always meant helping Julian fall in love with him. The system then explained that its central processor had crashed immediately after giving him the initial mission, and it had only just been discovered and rebooted by a passing patrol from the Transmigration Bureau. Leo could only stare, dumbfounded, then burst into laughter. If only he had known the truth from the start. The system assured him there was no rush to return. Time in this world flowed differently. He could live out a full life here before closing the mission. And so he did. Years turned into decades. They were pioneers, becoming the first legally married same-sex couple in the country the day the laws changed. Their story became a quiet legend. They grew old together, their love a constant, steady flame. One morning, Leo woke to find that the warmth beside him had gone cold. He could not wake Julian. With a calm he hadn't known he possessed, he carried out the plans they had made decades before, donating their vast fortune to charity. Then he lay down beside Julian one last time, closed his eyes, and called the system to take him home. Back in his original world, the $5 million was in his account. Life felt empty, aimless. He had no goal, no one to rush home to. He considered a life of quiet, boring retirement. Then, one day, while scrolling idly through a business news site, he saw a familiar face. A young, brilliant tech mogul named Julian Vance was being profiled as a rising star. The Vance Corporation in this world soon received an application for an executive assistant position. It was from a man with a quiet confidence in his eyes and a resume that was, to put it mildly, impressive. A new story was about to begin.